Welcome to another edition of the Upper Bowl Perspective, a Utah Jazz podcast giving you an Upper Bowl point of view with courtside quality, joined as always by my co-hosts Kyler and Landon. And even though we are in the midst of the offseason and not much is going on the playing front for the Utah Jazz, we definitely have a couple things to talk about today. First and foremost, let's talk about the breaking news from just about an hour ago. We're recording this on Saturday afternoon, is that the Jazz have signed former NBA champion, former NBA Sixth Man of the Year, former March Madness winner, Jason Terry as an assistant coach to Will Hardy. It was rumored before the Jazz actually signed Will Hardy as a head coach that he was in the final round of interviews for that head coaching position. And Kyler Landon, as the Jazz are now looking to move on from the Quinn Snyder era to a new coaching era, what does this signing mean for the Jazz?
I think it's pretty exciting. As the Jazz interviews went along, he was one of my favorite candidates. I was kind of rooting for him to become head coach. The fact that we could snag him as an assistant coach, I really like. Like you said, he's a recent champion, former player, and I think both of those add value in terms of just knowing what it takes to get there, and also both just as a player and as a champion. So I think it's a really good addition.
Yeah, I mean, I'd be lying if I said I knew a lot about Jason Terry, specifically as like I knew him as a player, but as far as a coach and his pedigree, I don't know a whole lot about him and his style. But I think it's always good to have a player like him or a former player like him on a staff, just because he's probably someone that the players can kind of go to and somebody you can kind of connect with more than maybe someone like Will Hardy could, just on that personal level. So I think having him there would be good. Probably the most consequential move the Jazz have made this whole offseason, frankly.
Yeah. It's been really interesting because over the past few years, because I feel like even back in the mid 2010s, whenever we were talking about coaches, people would always say, is this an offensive coach? Is this a defensive coach? And now it seems like people talking coaches more of, is this an X's and O's coach or is this a player's coach? And I think that with Will Hardy, we definitely got a guy who's known for being great with the X's and O's, who's really strategic, who's probably really good with creating lineups. Jason Terry, though, he really projects as a guy who might be more of that player's coach who can build relationships with the team and kind of be that guy to back up Will Hardy as a really good right-hand man. As I was looking at Jason Terry, I was like, I feel like he was playing fairly recently. The dude was in the league in 2018 playing for the Milwaukee Bucks. So it's not like he's been out of the NBA for that long. So there's still got to be a lot of guys in the league who either played with him or know who he is, but he's still a young guy. He's not a super old guy. So now we've got Will Hardy, who's 34 as the head coach, and a guy who was in the league just 4 years ago, even though he wasn't playing a ton, as our head assistant. And to me, it seems like the Jazz now have their X and O's coach, and they also have their players coach. I can imagine that Jason Terry probably had a lot more offers if he wanted them to be an assistant coach than just the Utah Jazz. What do you think the appeal is for Jason Terry to choose to coach with Utah as an assistant rather than either keeping his job as a G League head coach or potentially going to another franchise?
Well, I think that, obviously, I think the ability to go to another team will always be there, especially if he kind of makes reputation as a coach in the NBA now. So I think this is definitely, bigger opportunity, more exposure than he would get in the G League. So that's probably the appeal to him. I would probably see this as a promotion, as a way to get, more eyes on him coaching for an NBA team. And then down the line, I could certainly see, another team poaching him.
Kyler, when Landon said that this might be one of the biggest moments of the offseason, I saw your face just kind of contort a little bit. Now, I don't know about you. I think I would still say that the Rudy Gobert trade is the biggest thing that have happened to the Jazz so far this offseason. But, Kyler, where would you rank this in terms of major moves that the Jazz have made this offseason? Because I think we can agree that it's probably not number one. Sorry, Landon. But is it maybe number two? Is it maybe number three? Where are we at?
I'd say hiring your head coach is also just out of it. I mean, as good of an assistant as Jason Terry might be, your head coach is probably going to be more impactful as to the success of your team. And then obviously, not extending the qualifying offer to Eric Pascal has to rank highly up there too. So,
yeah, I mean
That's when we fell apart.
Between between Eric Pascal and then getting Taco Fall on our summer league roster, like those are definitely two big moves that are probably more
keeps
impactful.
falling down the list, man. No, I think it's super great, and I think you pick Utah because it's an opportunity at a fresh start, and especially a team that looks like it's kind of maybe going the OKC road. You get an opportunity to kind of prove some mettle as a player development guy because there's probably going to be a lot of young draft talent coming through Utah in the next few years. And so if you can kind of be given credit to the ascendance of some young players, that is something that will catapult you to the promotion that Landon was talking about. So in terms of guys that kind of want to be known for player development coaches, Utah's looking like it's going to be one of the more attractive destinations among the league right now.
Which they've already built that reputation over the past 10 years or so between Rudy Gobert and helping turn him into what he's become, helping Donovan Mitchell thrive. Even guys like Royce O'Neal, who we just traded a few weeks ago to the Nets, from an undrafted guy to being a quality starter in the league is a pretty huge jump. And it's exciting to see that even though the Jazz have lost their old coaching staff of Quinn Snyder, it looks like Danny and his crew are really focused on making sure that we have all the pieces in the coaching staff and in the front office to make sure that as we push eventually into hopefully becoming a title contender in a few years after we go through this rebuild, that the Jazz will be in a better position to actually win. So it's definitely super exciting. Jason Terry, if you're watching this, huge welcome to Utah. We're excited to have you as an assistant coach, and we're excited to see what you and Will Hardy are able to do with all of this young talent coming up this season. For the rest of the podcast, both in this segment and in part two, this is just going to be a Donovan Mitchell podcast. Over the past few days, especially the last 72 hours, the rumors surrounding Donovan Mitchell have run rampant, especially the asking price that the Utah Jazz are asking for Donovan and some of the biggest suitors out there. For the rest of this segment, we're just going to focus on one team, which is by far the front runner for the Donovan Mitchell acquisition compared to everyone else, which is the New York Knicks. Things with Miami have cooled off a lot, so we're not going to talk about them as much today, but we are going to talk about the Knicks.
Glad I could convince you of that.
Yeah, I mean, if we would have recorded this 2 days ago, we probably would have done the Miami takes, but instead we're just going to focus on the Knicks for this segment. According to multiple reports, it sounds like the asking price for Donovan Mitchell was 6 first-round picks, which is pretty insane, along with the players Quentin Grimes, Emmanuel Quickly, Obi Toppin, and Miles McBride. Now, even though these aren't the best trade pieces on the block for New York, just as a caveat, it's been rumored the reason the Jazz don't want RJ Barrett or they're not going after Cam Reddish is because they don't want to pay them because they're coming up for contract extension pretty soon.
Well,
just off the top
now.
Yeah. So just off the bat, do you think that's a good trade? Like, do you think that's worth Donovan? Is that the direction the franchise you want to go? There's a lot of things we can break down with this, but what is your initial reaction when you heard that's the asking price for Donovan Mitchell?
It's a long way away from the trade packages we had discussed in our hypotheticals in our previous episodes. But given what they got for Gobert, it makes sense. You know, a lot of those trades we were talking about earlier of getting like the young players, maybe they only trade one, or maybe we're only getting like 4 or 5 total picks between the two. Well, we already got in all practice like 5 from Gobert. So at that point, might as well just go all in, become the new OKC. Everybody's loving the way their rebuild is looking right now. And so if that could be potentially you in a few years, then I think that's fine. If that's what the Jazz want is just picks, I think this is the best offer you're going to get. Do I think maybe getting more of a NBA proven talent that, yeah, sure, you'll have to pay soon, might be worth more than just 2 theoretical picks that could be in the 20s? Absolutely, I do, but this seems the direction the Jazz are going. So,
I mean, I think this trade only makes sense in a post Rudy Gobert trade world to be quite honest with you. I think that's the only way the Jazz have the audacity to like list this as the asking price for him. I mean, Danny Ainge absolutely inflated the market with that deal, and I think I've read that a lot of NBA teams aren't happy about it. I mean, yeah, this is an awesome deal. If we could make it happen, I would even, go down on a pick or a player if we had to. I still think it's a great deal. I still think we get a haul for him, and it really sets us up in a good position to win. There's going to be, I think, some kind of, awkward and frustrating moments going through the next couple seasons, though, with all these young players, figuring out who we want to keep, who we don't, who wants to be here, who doesn't. I just think it's going to be a mess, and I think it's going to be hard to watch. So that'd probably be the downside going into this season, probably next season as well, especially when you throw, all these young players in with the deal. But I mean, I think if we're willing to, as a fan base, put up with that, put up with some terrible basketball for the next little bit, then I think this sets us up really nicely.
Oh yeah, in terms of just like quality of basketball, we would rival like the early years process Sixers in terms of how bad we would be. Just like absolutely terrible. Landon and I were talking, and assuming Donovan is traded, we probably want to get rid of Mike too, and maybe even Clarkson at that point. Like, is there a single player on this roster that is like capable of creating separation on their own? And so if you have a roster like that, it's very hard to even judge, say, Will Hardy, how he's doing. Because if you don't have a single player on your roster that creates separation, how can you judge how effective a coach's offense is? And so if we go down this route and it ends up resulting in also like a Mike trade, and I don't think we should trade Clarkson, but if they do, yeah, it's just going to be very hard to judge a lot of things about Jazz basketball until probably we get like 2 or 3 drafts worth of prospects.
Yeah, I mean, when you think about the contract that we gave Will Hardy as a first-time head coach, we gave him a longer contract than what you normally see in the market for a guy who hasn't proven it as an NBA head coach. And if you think about the length of the contract for Will Hardy, it's almost as if they were bringing him in here saying, Danny's going to do a full rebuild. We're going to blow this all the way up. And you're going to have some time to develop young talent, but we don't expect you to be good for the next couple of years. Because to be frank, with all those players that are rumored to be involved in that New York package, like Quentin Grimes, Obi Toppin, Emmanuel Quickly, none of those guys project as being like really good starters in the league in the short term. I mean, maybe Obi Toppin might be like the best option there, but more of these guys project as guys that you would love to have as your 7th or 8th guy on your roster, as somebody who can come in and play really solid bench minutes for you. And who knows if that's going to change. Like, Quickly's definitely had his moments. Grimes is definitely a scrappy player. Obi Toppin is an amazing athlete and a solid offensive player. But when you look at these guys that we're not getting one quality starter. This is purely because we want picks from a New York franchise that is arguably one of the most incompetent franchises we've had in the past 30 years, up there with like the Sacramentos, who have just really excelled at failing for a very long time. Do you agree with what the Jazz are going for with this trade, though? Because there have been talks that like Cam Reddish is on the table, who's a better player than anyone that we've talked about before, and definitely RJ Barrett, who projects to be a future multi-time All-Star to a lot of different people. Do you think the Jazz should go with the full blow it up method, or would you prefer if they maybe did 4 first-round picks, 2 or 3 of those players we talked about earlier, and then like an RJ Barrett or a Cam Reddish?
I don't think you get 4 first if you're getting RJ Barrett, but I kind of agree with the Jazz in the case of Reddish because he's extension eligible now and he's a free agent after this summer, and it's how much do you pay Cam Reddish to a point where like the team and Reddish would accept the value? I think it's very hard. And honestly, RJ Barrett's probably going to be kind of like Ayton, where you're hesitant to give him the max, but somebody's going to give him the max, and all of a sudden, are you wanting to pay RJ Barrett $30 million a year as soon as 2023? But for a team that's not really paying anyone and is going to be bringing in a lot of picks on rookie scale contracts, I'm fine with paying one guy $30 million for the next 4 years in the case of RJ Barrett, and trying to see if he can become something. So I don't agree with the Jazz on not wanting RJ Barrett, but I will side with them, even though I love Cam Reddish and I have since he was in the draft. This is kind of a hard time to trade for him, I would say.
Yeah.
I think with the direction the Jazz are going, I would definitely agree with them. If it means giving up an extra pick or two to pick up RJ Barrett and then ultimately pay him, or pick up Cam Reddish, I would definitely say no. I think if we're not keeping Donovan Mitchell, then I want this to be as complete of a rebuild as we can possibly do. Let's really build this back up from the foundation through the draft. Because, I mean, Utah Jazz, the market as it is now, that's the only way that we're going to be able to build a team that's sustainable contending through the draft. So let's get ourselves as many chances to pick those stars as we can. Like, as good as RJ Barrett and Cam Reddish can be. I mean, they're not, your franchise guys. I don't think they're going to be that. So, I mean, if we cannot, getting them sacrifices picks, I would say no. I like the way, I'd rather have what the Jazz are going for.
Yeah, like it seems like every time the Jazz are or the Jazz fans that I see, especially on like Jazz Twitter, saying things like, oh, well, how can we be at least somewhat competitive like next year? How can we fight for that play-in game? It seems like a lot of Jazz fans are trying to figure out how can we still be okay, even if we're going through a quote unquote rebuild. And I think just with today's day and age in the NBA, it's really hard to do a rebuild and try to be like halfway decent at the same time. You almost have to choose one or the other, just because right now, after the Rudy Gobert trade, the market is super inflated in terms of trade value, and a lot of guys who wouldn't be like considered what they are right now. And then also with the DeAndre Ayton piece of this, I mean, I don't know about you guys. I love DeAndre Ayton. I don't know if he's worth for $133 million. So just where we're at right now with still trying to navigate the playing game, an amazing draft class that's projected next year, along with just there's so much talent in the league right now. Even the bad teams are going to be so much fun to watch on League Pass next year that I think it's a really – except for the Jazz. The Jazz might be like the worst League Pass team in the league next year if we end up doing this Donovan Mitchell trade.
So like the pro version of 2K this year gives you League Pass, and I bought the pro version of 2K, so I have League Pass. And I might end up watching substantially more non-Jazz basketball this year than Jazz basketball. A, for the fact that you just mentioned, the bad teams are exciting. And B, that includes everyone except for the Jazz. So
I'd probably do the same, but more for like my eye health.
Yeah.
In case I have to watch those yellow jerseys.
Yeah,
it's
the
true.
yellow jerseys reminding you what good basketball sometimes looks like. Might have to take some non-Jazz games this year. That would be my recommendation for all Jazz fans, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, it is hard when, as of right now, if we do the Donovan Mitchell trade, who's the best player on the Jazz next year? Is it Bojan Bogdanovic? Is it Jordan Clarkson? Is it Mike Conley? Like, who is it going to be? But
I'm all in for Jordan Clarkson playing 35 minutes a game and scoring like 30 on like 40%. I mean, I could handle that for 20 games before I got bored of it. So I'm down for it, I think.
It would certainly be a ton of fun. As of right now, on Saturday, as we're recording this pod, it seems like while the Knicks are still definitely the front runner for this trade to go down with Donovan Mitchell, it seems like trade talks have cooled the past couple of days just because the Knicks don't want to give up so many future assets in terms of draft capital that they kind of cripple their future, or they cripple their flexibility for roster construction going forward. As of right now, what percentage do you think it is that Donovan Mitchell ends up playing in a Knicks jersey at the start of the season? Like, how likely do you think it is that the Jazz trade Donovan to the Knicks?
So I think it's a question of when and not if at this point. I don't know when that'll happen. It could not, like, Donovan could definitely play to the start of the season. I think, that could happen. But, I mean, Mitchell's been linked to the Knicks for so long. It doesn't look like any other team can offer what the Knicks can offer at this point for the way that they set themselves up, going into this draft. I mean, they're the best partner. I'm sure Mitchell would probably prefer to go there to other destinations. I think it's almost a certainty. It's just a matter of when.
Yeah, I mean, it's been kind of a war on Twitter between two fan bases as to who has the leverage in this trade. Because from the Knicks' point of view, you're like, you have a star who wants out, who wants to come here. It's just going to happen. Or from the Jazz point of view, you have a lot of years left on Donovan's deal. And Leon Rose, who came in for the Knicks, when he came in, he promised stars, 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 stars. He's been there for a while now, and the closest they've gotten is Jalen Brunson. So from Danny's point of view, we're like, Donovan's here for 3 years at least, and you need to deliver on a promise before you lose your job. And so I think it's just a matter of I don't think Danny's going to really budge on his price. Like maybe a little bit, maybe those players in 5 picks, or maybe one of those players is out in the 6 picks. But I don't see the Jazz really doing much to soften their offer. I think it's just a matter of if Leon Rose feels the pressure to deliver on the promise he made when he was hired, because this is his best opportunity to do it. And the Knicks, I mean, they traded their pick this year for 3 future firsts, and you kind of knew what that was for, right? And so they've kind of already made moves to set up for this move. And so it feels like Danny just needs to wait out Leon Rose to see if he has the patience. And I don't think he will. I would say it's very likely. You said a scale of 1 to 10. I think in 8 worlds out of 10, Mitchell is a Knick before the season starts.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Landon.
Oh, I was just gonna say, like, Nick's Twitter has been absolutely hilarious to read through during this whole thing. I saw like this one tweet. It was this guy tweeted out like, it was a Julius Randle highlight reel. He was like, "Yo, Utah, you seeing this? You need this guy."
And then did you send him like video from the playoffs 2 years ago and just been like, "Yeah, we have seen this. We have seen this. We don't want this."
So J-Bell, we have a question for you.
Yeah.
In the mock offseason episode we did, I proposed an OKC like offseason for the Jazz. And your counter to me was, "Hey, this never works." And so you weren't a big fan of it. So what do you feel about the fact that it looks like the Jazz are basically going the OKC route now?
All right. So I will clarify. I didn't say that it never works. I said that up to this point, we don't have a lot of examples where it has worked, and that we have more examples
saying it's never worked.
Yeah, but that being said, I don't think that it's not possible. I like the idea of rebuilding in certain contexts. It just depends. What really changed my thought process for me and what I wanted the Jazz to do in the mock offseason happened with the Rudy Gobert trade. Because when we did the Rudy Gobert trade, I was not expecting to get that much draft capital from Rudy Gobert. And I also wasn't expecting to get the types of players that we got. I thought if we were trading Rudy Gobert, we were going to get another couple like really good quality starting level players that may be able to complement Donovan Mitchell more. And instead we got a bunch of role players and young guys and a bunch of picks, which that creates a very different situation on the Jazz roster in my mind. So for me, up until the Rudy Gobert trade, I still liked the idea of trying to retool and build around Donovan Mitchell. But after we traded our second best asset in Rudy Gobert and got basically nothing that was going to help us win next season, that's when I thought it made a lot more sense based on our current assets and also the overinflated market for players right now in the trade market. That's when I kind of shifted my focus on the best thing for the Jazz is actually doing the full rebuild. So that's when it changed for me. And yeah, I'm now on the rebuild hype train.
Glad you've joined the dark side. I've been waiting for people to join me on this lonely train for so many months, and it's a good time.
Well, and hopefully we're not on the same dark side if this Donovan Mitchell trade does happen, because I don't know about you guys, but I think it would be hilarious to see a big three of Donovan Mitchell, Jalen Brunson, and Julius Randle, because everyone's going to score 140 points on them, and it's going to be hilarious. But that'll wrap it up for the first segment. We're going to be back in part 2, where we're each going to take another team that hasn't been linked to Donovan Mitchell that we think could also provide a really good trade package for the Jazz. So we are going to take a break, and we'll be back in a few minutes with some more Donovan Mitchell trade packages. See you. Welcome back to part 2 of this edition of the Upper Bowl Perspective. In part 1, we talked about Jason Terry and the possible trade of Donovan Mitchell to the New York Knicks. In this segment, because as we mentioned in our last segment, at this point, the Donovan Mitchell trade, it's looking much less like an if, but a when. And in this one, we're going to talk about more potential hows. what are some other teams that may be interested in Donovan Mitchell that could offer trade packages that we think could be the best for the Jazz. We've each gone through, we've picked a different team that we would like to see the Jazz potentially explore a trade for with the Donovan Mitchell. And we're just going to go through each one by one, explain our team, explain the basis of the trade, and we'll chat about it one by one. Kyler, let's start off with you. I know that you have a very fun trade in mind for this one, so tell us what you're thinking.
Okay, I just want to preface this by, admittedly, this idea was more intriguing prior to the draft, but I think it still holds some value. Mine is the Orlando Magic. And if you look at the Magic roster, and you're talking about the young teams that have a lot of talent and that could, catapult them in the next couple of years in terms of kind of from bottom feeder into a true playoff viable team, kind of what they've been missing over the last long time, honestly, is a go-to scorer, a guy that you can dependably count on to get you 25 a night. Donovan's proven that he can do that both in the regular season and in the postseason, even more so in the postseason throughout his career. But the Magic have had a need for that forever. And so they also have a team that's full of just really, really good defenders that can mask Donovan's defensive liabilities. And I don't know exactly who you guys are going to talk about, but probably better than anyone else that we're going to talk about today. And so I like it for that point of view. Then they went and drafted Paolo Banchero, who his projection in the NBA is to be just that at the forward. So I feel like the Magic's need for Donovan has gone down since the draft. If they had drafted Jabari or Chet, I think this would be a great idea for them. But I still don't think it's a bad idea. Having two really good scorers is not a bad problem to have in the NBA. So the deal, after getting to why I think Orlando would work, is Jalen Suggs. It would be the main player you're getting back, which I think is better than anyone in the Knicks package, just because he's a year removed from being a fifth overall pick. If you look at his rookie year, you're not excited about it, but he is also injured, and he doesn't have a deep injury history, so I don't think it's too worrisome, those injuries that he had in his rookie year. And then the other player you'd be getting back to help with salaries is Jonathan Isaac, who, that guy, yes, you are very worried about his injuries, but he also has a contract that it's very easy to get out of because of he's so injury prone that when he signed it, there was a lot of things put in there to protect the Magic against Jonathan Isaac's injuries. So you could play him for a year. If he keeps getting injured, you can cut him for very little. Or you have a guy who when he's been on the court, is one of the better defenders in the entire league of basketball. I mean, you talk about a guy that can play small ball 5 and guard up to 2s. I mean, that's your guy. So two players that are much more intriguing than what the Knicks can provide. And for that reason, I don't think it would take 6 picks. The Magic don't owe any future picks, so they still have a lot of picks to give. They can give, the every other year, they can give pick swaps. They just don't have as many of those extra picks as the Knicks have to get up to like 6 or even 8, which is the Knicks' potential. So you're thinking more along the lines of 3 picks and some swaps, or maybe 4 picks and not as many swaps. But you're getting 2 players that I think are a lot more intriguing than the Knicks players.
I love Suggs. I mean, the thing I love most about this deal is that I think Jalen Suggs is someone whose stock value right now in the league is so low just because of his injury prone last season. And when he did play, he wasn't super good. But coming out of the draft, I loved Suggs. I remember watching him in March Madness. I remember just seeing him as an athlete and as a guy who I think could be a really solid scorer in this league. So I love that as kind of the basis, because I think that Jalen Suggs could be a guy who has a much higher likelihood of hitting than probably anybody we're going to talk about in these potential trades. With the Jonathan Isaac thing, I think it makes sense for the future. I mean, I wouldn't be expecting to get anything out of him if you're the Jazz. I mean, if you do, then that's just kind of,
Yeah, it's just a bonus. It's just mostly salary matching at this point is what he'd be considered.
Yeah. I mean, I think he's written more books in the last 2 years than he's played NBA basketball games. So, I mean, he's not somebody that we're actually looking to play games. But, I mean, I think the biggest thing here is that can we get a guy like Jalen Suggs who could potentially replace Donovan Mitchell in the Jazz's roster as a guy who could be the next like go-to scorer in a franchise, because that's what he projected as coming into the league. And I think that he could definitely hit. So I think it's very intriguing. I'm not sure if I like it more than the New York deal, but it's definitely giving me pause to think about it.
I mean, you're also talking about a franchise who's has a lot of history of not being that great. I mean, not as dysfunctional as the Knicks franchise, but just the franchise that just can't seem to get it right ever. And so they also have just like a bunch of guards. So I think Jalen Suggs would be pretty expendable. I'm not very high on Jalen Suggs personally. I think it's a very intriguing thought exercise just because, like, if you want to have a reason to watch the Jazz next year, if you're just like, please, I would trade 2 picks for a reason to watch the Jazz next year. If that's kind of your mindset as a Jazz fan, I think this is the trade for you because you can still get a lot of picks and swaps, but you can actually at least get a guy who was a top 5 pick a year ago. Again, not my kind of guard. The reason is he doesn't have elite size and he doesn't have elite like burst or get off or like handles. He's not elite at anything. He's just really good all around. And I just think to be a top tier guard, you need to have an elite trait. But I would at least be intrigued to watch him. Like I would love to be proved wrong that he actually is like a top tier prospect. So watchability along with still a really good haul of picks, I think is a decent offer.
Yeah. I think if I were Orlando, I'd absolutely love this. We talked about it before. I think if you're going to give Donovan Mitchell like an elite skill, it's probably scoring off the pick and roll. And so I think a Donovan Paulo pick and roll type system would be absolutely lethal. And it would be great to watch, really entertaining. And I think it would actually make them really good.
And then you have Franz Wagner, who I love Franz Wagner. You have Wendell Moore. You have Mo Bamba, who signed back. You have Markelle Fultz. You have Cole Anthony coming off the bench. I mean,
Wendell Carter, I don't know if they drafted Wendell Moore, but you were thinking of Wendell Carter.
Yeah. Sorry, my bad. Wendell. Anyway, that Wendell, the center Wendell. But if the Jazz were to make that trade with Orlando becomes like what, a top 3 or 4 league pass team, like with the combination of a bona fide superstar in Donovan Mitchell, along with the first overall pick in the draft and a bunch of really good young players. Miami could be frisky next year. Like they could be a super fun team who might win a lot more games than they're projected.
Yeah. And that'd be my concern with Utah is I think that those draft picks that we could get for them would diminish in value very quickly. And I don't like Jalen Suggs would be interesting to watch. I don't know if he's, going to be that good. I'm not that high on him, but again, like for Orlando, I think that's awesome. I would watch them next year. Be a league pass team for sure.
You're also, cause you're talking to future picks for a small market team. So you're hoping that maybe Paolo's unhappy there. Donovan might not want to resign there. So you're hoping that, again, this is a team just based on its history. It's had a couple of, blips where, the Dwight Howard, Hito Turkoglu team that went to the finals and all that. But you're looking at future. I think it's a decently safe bet. I mean, maybe Paolo and Donovan love each other and want to stay there forever. But there's also a decent chance that it doesn't work out. And Donovan just says, cool, I'll play for you for 2 years, Orlando, then I'm going to New York, And so the future picks and swaps, like I agree, at least like the first 2 or 3 years of picks, whatever we're getting, aren't going to look great. But you're really betting on if you get like the last pick you get is like a top 5 pick, then you're shmoney, even if the rest were in the 20s. So,
yeah. Which I mean, you would imagine if you get a lot of picks from Orlando, at least one of them is going to be like a top half of the lottery pick, whether that's in the short term or whether that's in the long term. it's really hard to imagine that Orlando's going to have like a long season of success, which that might happen. Maybe Paolo becomes like the Magic's number one guy they've ever had, and he becomes like an incredible player, and he becomes like Shaq is no longer greatest draft pick of all time. We're going to have that be Paolo Banchero, which who knows, that might happen, but it's hard to imagine that they're going to be super good for like 7 years.
Yeah, just using that example, like in the span of like 4 years, they drafted like Penny Hardaway, Shaq, and Tracy McGrady. So talk about young core, and look what it turned into. Nothing. They ended up picking Dwight Howard with the first pick. So that's just kind of an example of like they might squander some really promising team.
That is definitely an intriguing conversation, made even more intriguing by how well Paolo's been playing in Summer League. So I think that's a good argument, Kyler. I like the thought process, and now I kind of want to go watch a little bit more Suggs tape. Landon, who do you got for us?
Okay. So Russell Westbrook had a down year last year, but I think he can really bounce back.
We're not doing this. We are not doing this. I refuse to talk about Russell Westbrook on this podcast.
I know I wasn't high on the team you want to talk about, but that one's even lower, bro.
It's like we get Russell Westbrook and 2 firsts from the Lakers.
Who says no?
We say no really quickly.
Yeah. No.
Anyway,
Landon's our sleeper Lakers Twitter fan. It's in our podcast, I guess.
Yeah.
No, that's not me.
Do you work for Genie Bus? Just question like. Anyway, continue.
Anyway, I did kind of pick a team that I kind of was one I hadn't heard anything about, one kind of on the beaten path, but I think might have some interesting packages. And that is the Indiana Pacers. Because the reasons being, they have 3 first-round picks next season in the 2023 draft. And I think they also have some players that could fill some holes we need. So my initial thought, I mean, obviously I'm willing to negotiate this, but I would love to see a package that looks like Miles Turner, Chris Duarte, and maybe TJ McConnell, and 2 first-round picks for Donovan Mitchell. You could throw Azubuike and Jared Butler in there too if you wanted. That's kind of the foundation of kind of what I want. I think Miles Turner is a great center, and we have a need for a center. He'd be great to plug in the middle. He's also an unrestricted free agent at the end of next season. So, if we want to sign him, we can. If not, if it doesn't work out, no problem. He could leave. We get the cap space, or we could maybe flip him at some point in the season if we needed to. I think Chris Duarte is a promising young wing. I think he showed, some real potential. I think he's the type of guy that you would tune into the Jazz to watch. As far as like being, the young prospect that we could look at, and he's a wing. So I think he really kind of, again, fits one of those holes that we need. And then TJ McConnell could be our new backup point guard. And I don't know, I mean, you throw him in there because he makes the salaries make more sense, but I don't know, those were my thoughts.
Well,
I'm thinking, Kyler, so if you could go first here, you said 2 firsts in those 3 players?
Like a 23 and 24.
okay, so many a thought. I have a hard time thinking if the Jazz don't want to get an RJ Barrett because they want to pay him. I don't know why they would want a Miles Turner to pay him. You said that we have a need at center. If we trade Donovan, we have a need every single spot on the court, from positions like most important player through 10th most important player. We need to fill every single piece. So I'm not worried about, we need a center, let's get one in the Donovan trade. Heck, start Azubuike and Walker Kessler. Heck, Twin Towers it. I don't care. Experiment. But don't sign a 1-year stopgap at center. And Chris Duarte, intriguing prospect, shows he can get a bucket, especially on the perimeter. He's also was 24 as a rookie, so he's going to be 25 already. And you get 3 more years of control, plus he'll be restricted after that. But not nearly kind of the youth that you're looking for. He came into the NBA kind of already having developed a lot of the skills that I think he can reach. So not a lot of opportunity for growth from the players you're getting. TJ McConnell, I have no feelings. He's the most blah player in the league. and then just 2 firsts. Indiana has some firsts, but none of them are looking great. Like if I'm only getting 2 firsts, I better be confident one of them's a top 10 pick. Probably actually both of them. At least one's going to be a top 10 and the other's going to be lottery. I better feel confident in it. And Indiana, like, what does that accomplish for you? You have Tyrese Halliburton, who I love, and Donovan Mitchell, who I love, in the backcourt. And then you have dog water for the rest of your roster. You couldn't sign DeAndre Ayton. That would have made it a little bit more intriguing. But
yeah,
I think
you
this
still
is
got to build, but I think that's an elite backcourt.
Yeah, you're starting with the backcourt, but also one, like, are they going to be good enough by the time Donovan Mitchell's player option is up that he's like, this is contending, this is worth avoiding going to a big market? Like, you have 2 years to do that, and you're giving away picks in those 2 years, and you're not a big market team to sign a free agent. So I don't know about that one.
I mean, here's my thought process, right? I love Miles Turner to death. Like, if you made a list of the players that J. Bobby loves more in the NBA than the average fan, Miles Turner would be right up there. I absolutely love him as a player. That being said, I don't think any of the players that you mentioned fit the Jazz's timeline for a rebuild. So for me, I mean, I think that if Indiana, if they're going to trade for Donovan, they're going to want Miles Turner because just of what he brings to their spacing and from the rim protection. I don't think they can trade for Donovan and include Miles Turner and think they have any shot at making the playoffs, even if they do have an elite backcourt. I like the Chris Duarte part. Once again, he is a little bit older, but I think he could be a really solid player in the league, and he definitely showed a lot of flashes last year. TJ McConnell, sorry, I'm struggling with names today, but TJ McConnell, I once described our friend Brock as TJ McConnell-ish, and it really offended him. So part of me just wants TJ McConnell on the Jazz so that I can make that joke like a bunch next year because we watch a lot of Jazz games with
Pat
Brock.
Bev and TJ McConnell on the Jazz.
TJ
that
McConnell
would ruin
up
him.
the Jazz last year. I'm not sure if you remember.
Oh, just as a side note, did you see
us.
Minnesota signed Austin Rivers, which is probably so Rudy Gobert is going to have extra ammo when he faces the Jazz because Austin Rivers is probably like 30 points per game career against the Jazz.
Jazz. It's so bad. But I don't hate the idea of a Pacers trade if it's centered around Duarte and then just all of their picks, because even with Donovan and it's like even with Donovan going over to the Pacers, I don't think that they're in a position to really be a great team. So I think those picks would actually be pretty good. And Donovan's not going to want to stay in Indiana long term. Like, he's going to want to move. So I think those picks could be good.
If you don't like Utah, he's not going to like Indiana.
Yeah. But if it's like Chris Duarte, filler, and like 4 picks, maybe 5 picks, something like that, then
6,
I mean, like that.
7.
I mean, like that would be ideal. But
what if we could get like 2 of their 3 2023 picks next year?
We have 3 already next
5
year.
in one draft.
Let's get more. Let's get all the 2023 draft picks, as many as we can. Let's collect them,
and then just like draft our entire starting 5 and in
that's
2023.
That's
Yeah,
an
let's
interesting
see who
thing
sticks.
because
See who sticks.
even with the Knicks trade, right? They have 4 picks in 2023. There's a good chance we have a ton of picks in 2023, which I don't know how great that is considering how like little we have in the even years. Because if you have 7 picks, let's say we get all the Knicks picks or the 3 Indiana picks or whatever we're talking about here, and you hit on 3, maybe 4 of those, that's a lot of guys coming up for big contracts all at the same time, which is not great for your team building. So
unless you can potentially package for like a Scoot or a Wembanyama or something like that.
Those packages
maybe,
never work. Like, 13, 17, 22, 24, and 27. You can offer 5 picks and it's still not going to get you a top tier prospect. It's just not how the draft works.
I can hope. But you're right. It's probably not going to happen.
You can hope.
I just think of all of those, you're going to have like 1 or 2 that you offer those rookie extensions to, and then the rest you don't. But I don't know. I
would hope more than 1 or 2 out of 7.
I would hope. All right. Well, Landon, I like the idea. I like the thought process. We may need to retool that one just a little bit more because I'm not sure how I feel about a landmark deal for Donovan Mitchell where the biggest star is Miles Turner, but we can definitely talk about
It's about
more
the
about
draft
that.
picks. It's about the draft picks.
You said 2 draft picks. We need
Two
more
of
than
Two
that.
for next year. 2 for 2023.
Dude, Knicks have 4. The Knicks have 4.
Well, I feel like we're going under the assumption that he's not going to the Knicks. We're going down this line of question.
And I would much
Well,
rather
at
have
least- at least
Quentin
Knicks have the
Grimes.
best option.
These are packages that maybe come in that are better than the Knicks, that can beat the Knicks,
Yeah.
right? And so even the Knicks have Detroit's pick. They have Washington's pick. Yeah, they're both protected.
Yeah.
But those are like decent teams to have their picks, right? And so I don't know.
Yeah.
And I'm more, if we can get like a 24, 26, and 28, kind of those alternating, because those are the years we're currently thin in.
But good thought process, good conversation. And now we'll go to the last one, which is me. So, Kyler, I actually had a similar thought process to you. Like, what's a good young team with a solid core that just needs something else to push them over the edge, where they actually go from being kind of a frisky play-in team to actually being a really solid playoff roster, which I think the Donovan trade to Orlando does that. And I thought about another team in the Western Conference that I think would have a very similar impact, which is trading Donovan to the New Orleans Pelicans. The Pelicans have an amazing young core. They have Zion Williamson, who they just signed to an extension. They have Brandon Ingram. They have Herb Jones, and like Jose Alvarado, who are definitely outplaying their contracts. So I think that Donovan coming in and being, it's like the lead guard for their team would be someone who would really help put them over the edge. They would be an elite offensive team at least, and they've got enough good defensive talent that I think you could kind of hide him in the backcourt, especially if he's playing alongside Herb Jones. So I think it makes a lot of sense for New Orleans. For the Jazz, I think it makes sense because if we want draft picks, we want to get the draft picks that we think are going to be the highest possible draft picks we can get. Because Kyler made a really good point when we were talking about the Indiana trade. It's really hard when you have a bunch of like late first round draft picks to try to trade up and get one of those franchise like saving players. So if we could potentially get draft picks that are going to be maybe top 5 picks, I would love to see if we could get the Lakers picks that New Orleans got in the Anthony Davis trade if we were able to trade Donovan Mitchell over to him. So as a general idea of a framework for a trade, we trade Donovan Mitchell and we throw in Rudy Gay for salary matching, and we take CJ McCollum, Kira Lewis, EJ Liddell, and 3 or 4 first-round picks. That's kind of my general thought process because even though CJ McCollum I don't love, he only has 2 years left on his deal. He makes very similar to what Donovan makes. I think Kira Lewis and EJ Liddell, who was a draft pick this year, I think they could be guys who could help fit with the Jazz's young core. Maybe one of them hits and becomes a rotation player. But the main reason I like this trade is because if we can get some of those Lakers firsts, I think that could be hugely beneficial to what the Jazz are trying to do in the future because the Lakers were an absolute mess last year. LeBron's getting older. Anthony Davis hasn't proved he can be healthy the past couple seasons. So I think those could be really high draft picks. So that's my thought.
And when you said Pelicans, I wasn't expecting that to be your offer. So I'm still thinking of what the one I thought you were going to do and if this one, which one I like more. So you go, Landon.
But real quick, though, while you're thinking, what did you think I was going to suggest?
I didn't think you were going to try to send us CJ McCollum. I thought it was going to be just basically prospects and picks, and you weren't going to. I'm trying to think if I like the Pelicans roster more without CJ McCollum and Donovan together in the backcourt. So you go, Landon.
Yeah. I mean, I don't mind CJ McCollum. It's part of the deal. The same way I wouldn't mind some of those Pacers players on the deal in the sense that we need like players who know how to play basketball to be on the court next year to watch and play. So having him is kind of like that placeholder there.
I'm flipping CJ.
Yeah.
I'm not keeping him in this trade scenario.
If you can, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm trying to think. I think it's a very kind of high risk, high reward type proposition because I mean the Lakers do look like they might be in trouble, but at the same time they're the Lakers and they have LeBron James and Anthony Davis. If they can figure out how to work something with Westbrook out, I think they could be competitive again very soon. And who knows what those draft picks end up looking like. Or maybe they, have like one down year, but they're the Lakers, so they, just attracted all NBA talent who wants out of whatever team he's in. So I mean, they could be bad, but I think there's a high likelihood that they could be really good too, and those draft picks aren't quite worth as much as we hope they are. But I think other than that, I think it's fine. I wouldn't mind it again. I think really it's just accepting the fact that, those Lakers picks could be really, really good, or they could also be really bad. I think you just have to go into that with that, I think, understanding of that risk.
Yeah, I mean, it could end up looking like you traded Donovan Mitchell for like 20 cents on the dollar, or you could end up with a couple really high picks, like you said. I would tend to lean just because I think LeBron's set to be there through his contract, through most, if not all, of the picks. I don't know about the pick swaps. So I feel like that at least gives the Lakers a floor, where I don't know if it's going to be a very, very top end pick. And so, I don't know if I love it for either team, because your CJ McCollum worked really well with the Pelicans last year. They didn't have Zion, and so you're introducing Zion. I almost feel like the Pelicans should kind of stand pat, because you proved to be a dangerous playoff team, and then you're adding a guy you just signed to a max extension. And so I don't know how much newness you want. You know that CJ McCollum works well with your core. And so I don't know if I love it for them. And then I don't know if the picks are quite as high of a ceiling as you think they are. So,
I mean, granted, I am very bearish on the Lakers. I mean, sure, something could happen, but just based on what happened last season, I think it's going to be very difficult for something to happen with Russ. Everything that I've heard coming out, like from reports, say that the Lakers organization is not as focused on pleasing LeBron James as they have been the past couple seasons. So I just think that the Lakers might be in a position where they might be willing to be bad for a little bit once the LeBron James contract is up, and then just see if they can maybe use Anthony Davis, get some more draft picks, be bad again, and then.
But you never have incentive to take if you don't have your picks. That's why, like, the Brooklyn KD thing is so hard, because they can't do a pick center package, because the most important thing to a rebuilding team is your own picks. So the Lakers will not rebuild. And LeBron James, yeah, he's bounced around teams, but he's never requested a trade. He has always fulfilled every single contract that he signed. And so, yeah, I think there's a high likelihood there's lottery picks, just because the surrounding talent and the assets are very bare minimum. But if LeBron's on the team, you're not going to be like a worst 5 team in the league. It's probably going to be the lottery, but maybe like the low teens, I would say.
I'm not sure. I mean, we are going into year 20 for LeBron. He's got to slow down at some point. I don't know when that's going to be, but maybe it's this season. Maybe this is where he has the big drop off. Maybe Anthony Davis can't get healthy. You have Russell Westbrook, who's not a winning player in his career. I just think I see that there's a higher likelihood, at least for me, that I think those Laker picks that we could potentially get from New Orleans could be really, really high than I think both of you are, which I think there's arguments each way, but I just have a really hard time seeing how the Lakers are going to be anywhere near even sniffing like the play-in for the next 2 or 3 seasons unless something drastic happens, which everything I've heard so far says that it's probably not going to happen. And if I'm trading Donovan Mitchell, I either want a ton of draft picks in the Knicks package, or I want the potential for really, really high draft picks. And I think out of all the teams we've talked about, I still think that those picks we could get from the Pelicans, that are those Lakers picks, have the best chance of being really, really high.
I do too. I just think
we want to do it.
Like, I think, isn't the last one they owe like 2025? So you have 2023 and 2025, or am I wrong on that? Is it 2024? And I think there's only 2 picks left.
I think there's 2 picks left, and then we would get one other one. Maybe 2 other ones. I don't know.
From like someone else, because I don't think the Lakers actually owe that many more picks. They do owe swaps still as well, but so you're talking about maybe one swing at the bat at a post LeBron Lakers pick, probably is one swing of a bat, hoping it's top 5 is that worth enough to pitch an entire trade for Donovan Mitchell on? I don't know.
It's a question. It's definitely a question.
That one swing of a bat could be Luka Doncic, it could be like the next great player, but it could also be Trey Lyles. So,
Trey Lyles, he just makes me sad.
Who was used to get Donovan Mitchell, so still, he ended up doing us good. But
yeah,
as a Jazz man, not great.
Yeah, I mean, there's always inherent risk when building through the draft. I think that's just part of the game. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, really, I think out of all these, I still feel like the Knicks have the best offer. I'm surprised no one talked about Sacramento. I thought they were kind of an intriguing trade partner, at least for the Jazz.
I thought about it. I just don't love De'Aaron Fox. I'm just not a Fox guy.
Yeah, if you want like likely dysfunctional picks, there you go. Like they're, the number 1 seed versus number 1 seed NBA Finals for dysfunctional franchises. But yeah, I don't think Sacramento is motivated to do that deal as much as New York is. I think the reason that the Jazz are asking for 6 from New York is because they're desperate. Minnesota was desperate. Karl Anthony Towns asked them to play power forward, and so they're like, we want a game-changing center that complements Karl Anthony Towns. Rudy Gobert was like the best available guy. They were desperate for him. The Knicks, Leon Rose and how he's promised stars and hasn't delivered. Donovan wants to go there. They're desperate. So we found 2 kind of desperate teams and are milking everything we can. I just don't think those other teams are going to be desperate to match their offer.
Yeah, which I mean, and any of the 3 teams that we've talked about, none of them are super desperate. Like Orlando has a great young core. You have the Pacers, who have always been like sniffing that 8th, 9th seed, like they're always kind of in the mix. And then you have the Pelicans, who overperformed last year without their best player playing. So just for all of you guys, how would you rank these potential options? Do you still think that the Knicks potential package is still like the best one? And if so, by how much?
A lot of it. So Knicks, the 2nd spot is empty. The 3rd spot is empty. In 4th comes in Orlando. In 5th comes in the Pelicans that you said. In 6th comes in the thing that we didn't discuss, Sacramento. 7th comes in Miami. 22nd comes in Indiana.
I'm sorry. I think I have to agree with Kyler on that one. I don't love the Indiana, but I like the thought process. Don't love the Indiana trade package, but I will say, Kyler, I think out of all the trade packages we talked about, even though I think that the Pelicans has the highest potential reward, I think that if you're in the Jazz front office, I think the one in Orlando does make the most sense out of the 3 that we talked about in this segment, even though I don't think it has the same ceiling. Yeah. I think it definitely has a much higher floor, which it's when you're looking to rebuild, and you have a lot of picks.
We didn't take in salary, which is what the Jazz have said they don't want to do. So there's that.
Yeah. I'm going to laugh when Duarte wins his first MVP. I'm just going to say that.
Landon, if Duarte wins his first MVP, I will take you and buy you a tomahawk steak at Fleming's.
Which comes first, Duarte's first MVP or Patrick Williams' second All-NBA that J. Bob was?
I said all defense. I meant all defense. That was months ago. Anyway, well, boys, we definitely have a lot of fun things going on with the Jazz right now, a lot of rumors. It's nice that even though the Jazz team that we've known and loved, at least to some extent for the past few years, is kind of falling apart, at least we have some good content to talk about. And us as the Upper Bowl Perspective will be bringing it to you every single week. Thanks for all of our fans who have been listening. It's been fun to get text messages, to see comments on these videos. We love doing this for you. If there's anything you want to talk about, just let us know, because the offseason, until there's another trade or until there's another signing, we might be a little thin on some things we can talk about. So feel free to send us your ideas and we'll be sure to hit it. This has been another episode of the Upper Bowl Perspective. Thanks again to Kyler and Landon, as always, for being willing to chat Jazz basketball with me. And we will see you next week with an all-new episode. Thanks, everyone.
Ciao, ciao.